This should conclude Chapter 11, Influencing the World from the Home, in You Can Change the World, The Christopher Approach by James Keller. There is the Christopher approach in action. Christ bearer. And thank God for it. Then again, there is the case of a Christopher keeping a young Jewish couple together when all signs pointed to a breakup in their marriage and eventual divorce. A materialist would have shrugged her shoulders and muttered something about not trying to tie people down. This Christopher talked the couple back to sanity and happiness. What was it Christ said? Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Matthew 5:9. And, of course, all these Beatitudes predate that. But there's a difference between being called something and being it, right? But we learn the children of God or children of the devil stuff is a language for people who have chosen a particular path. I mean, biblically, we know this, and I've pointed that out. Take the initiative. It is easy to fall into the attitude that changing times make it more difficult for succeeding generations to guard the sanctity of the home and to build strong and resilient families. It is easy to blame wars, depressions, booms, industrial and scientific revolutions as making much of American home life a weird and confusing kind of existence. According to 900 experts attending the recent National Conference on Family Life in Washington, D.C., among the harmful changes interfering with proper home life were listed: the sharp increase in divorce, more housewives, 1/4 in all, working outside the home, changing standards of sexual behavior, decline of interest in religion, drastic altering of family relations, the reduction in the size of the average U.S. family from 5.7 persons in 1790 to 3.6 today, an increasing number of families leaving the farm. 83% now live in urban areas, such as other factors as economic insecurity and the increasing mobility of individuals and families. It is our conviction, however, that this present dangerous trend can be reversed. Well, it's gotten worse, right? So that normal, healthy family life will once more take its place as the backbone of our civilization and bring an abundance of peace and happiness to all mankind. To accomplish this means that the home will have to take the initiative and influence the world instead of allowing itself to be influenced. Once you are convinced that it is much more hopeful and constructive to use every means possible to bring the peace of Christ that is in your home out into the mainstream of life than to withhold it from the great majority who want and need it so much, then you will enthusiastically initiate from the sanctuary of your home many Christopher practices which will have an ever-widening influence for good. To make this a reality, we submit a few proposals which you may find helpful. Think in terms of the world. No matter how remote you may be from the marketplace, you can begin to reach out to all mankind. The very desire and attempt to do this will bring a blessing upon you, your home, and humanity. You will be imitating the world vision of Christ. Everything you do will take on new meaning as it did for one housewife who caught this perspective. Thank you for inspiring an ingrown homemaker whose life has previously been bounded on all sides by homely details of childcare, family feeding, and furniture dusting. Now I can see how this little world can take on new light as a fertile field for planting and living Christ for a bigger world. And so on from there. 2. Pray for the world as well as for your home. The true Christopher will go far beyond the family circle with supplications to God. On the wings of prayer, one can literally reach out over the globe itself. It is helpful to fix on particular intentions, a different one each day, each week, or each month, if one chooses. Offering prayers for some specific purpose assures better continuity and greater sincerity. Now, a lot of Luciferians would say ritual instead of prayer because Well, a lot of the meaning of the word prayer has been lost. In the Bible, it does sort of mean ritual. It's not just, say and think whatever you want. That's not quite the definition of prayer. Now, as far as salah is the Semitic root, right? Stuff like that. But it isn't difficult to acquire the habit of offering a daily prayer for our president, for Congress, for the United Nations, for the millions in Russia and in Soviet-dominated lands, for the communists themselves, for all who suffer because of their race, color, or creed, for the billion and more men, women, and children over the earth who have not yet heard that Jesus Christ was born, lived, and died for each and every one of them. One lady who, in order to make ends meet, has to hire out as a laundress after finishing her household work, prays daily for one of America's top labor leaders for, as she says, I don't know of anyone who needs prayers more. In the midst of your work, around the home, you can say a passing prayer for all who died the day before. The obituary column in your morning paper can be your reminder for that. When you attend a movie, a football game, go to the beach or any other place where people congregate, take a moment to offer a prayer for all present. Eternity has begun for each of them, even though the majority never realize it. The more you pray for everybody, the poor, the rich, the strong, the weak, the friendly, the hostile, the wise, the stupid, the ugly, the fair, the more you will grow in love for them. You will experience a sense of participation with Christ in the salvation of the world that is possible in a few other ways. No particular form is necessary. You can make up your own prayer or use the following Christopher prayer. Inspire us, O God, with such a deep love for our country that we will be actively concerned in its welfare, as well as in that of all our fellow countrymen, for time and for eternity. Teach us to show by word and deed the same zealous interest in protecting and furthering the Christian principles upon which our nation is founded, that others display in belittling or eliminating them. Guide and strengthen the President, his cabinet, the members of Congress, the delegates of the United Nations, the governor of our state, the officials of our community, and all others, in high position or low, who are entrusted with the task of protecting for all citizens those rights which come from thee, and from thee alone. Teach us likewise to be worthy instruments in the extending to all men of all nations, thy children and our brothers, the same peace, freedom, and security with which thou hast so abundantly blessed our land. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. Well, Matthew 7:22-23 would indicate that you do not do good works in Jesus' name. You do not heal in his name. You do not cast out demons in his name. He's going to say that that's working outside his law. So, you can drop that last sentence, right? 3. Dispose your children to lead lives of purpose. A tremendous change for the better would take place if 1/4 of the 37,623,000 families in this country were to encourage at least one child in each family group to dedicate a life to some career through which the best values learned from parents could be channeled to the big market. Unfortunately, and without intending any harm, many parents prepare their children for life pursuits that are discouragingly negative and restrictive. They fence them in as far as anything creative is concerned. They train them to be aimless followers rather than leaders. In 100 different ways, they mold them to routine passiveness and to taking as much out of the world as possible. And by implication, at least, they give them to understand that they should not be overly concerned with putting anything in. Even those parents with strong religious backgrounds are increasingly becoming entangled in the double game of trying to serve God and mammon, with mammon slowly but surely winning out in their children even more than in them. There is a tragic tendency to ignore the hidden power for good in each individual and to deaden it as if it does start to blossom forth. As a poor and harmful substitute, these same parents hold continually before their children's growing minds standards of worldly success, more money, better clothes, nicer homes, more expensive cars. It would surprise these parents to know how often their offspring are disappointed in the lack of inspiration given them. Recently, One young woman discovered a dangerous situation at a large teachers' college. This woman had the faith and ability to help remedy it. Yet, when asked why she didn't become a teacher herself, she replied, "I wanted to, but my mother and father told me to go and get a job where I could earn more money." Many good German parents spoke the same way to their children and learned only too late that by keeping them away from the vital fields, they probably did more than the NSDAP themselves to pave the way for their nation's doom. Well, it could be a lot more constructive to have criticized the abuses of the elite or going along with certain things that some of them want the populace to do. Because it wasn't just some issue with one political movement or something. For the first 15 or 20 years of their life, your children look to you for guidance, not only in the small things, but in the big things of life. You can train them to be Christ-minded or worldly-minded. Both possibilities are there. And, there's a third, that's broader than just Christ-minded. But, if you think of Christ as the anointed consciousness, then, it becomes broader than a Christian thing. It is up to you to set the pace and to point the proper direction. You can start improving the world once you see in your own flesh and blood the personal representatives you could ever have as Christophers. They will be the hope of the world when they, and enough more like them, get into the thick of things, and they become active Christ bearers, and they will bring into the marketplace the goodness you passed on to them from God. These children of yours may someday touch the lives of countless persons as teachers and government workers, as writers, as experts in the labor field, as librarians, and as social service workers if you start right now to develop a missionary outlook within them. 4. Get into trends, national as well as local. No matter how little time you have to spare from the duties of your home, which must always take precedence. Try to use any spare moments on the bigger national projects as well as on those of your immediate environment. Don't by any means overlook local issues. They are important, but you will find the more you interest yourself in the bigger problems, the more concerned you will be with the more important phases of local enterprises. Always remember that those who are against God are ever on the alert to poison the mainstream of life. Knowing that the average person with religious convictions ordinarily moves in a very small sphere and shows little interest in bringing his principles to the marketplace. For you, this is as ringing a challenge as it was to a lady in Detroit one afternoon not long ago, about to mail her resignation to the Parent Teachers Association. Today, the PTA has an all-time high membership of 5,127,896. She happened to meet a friend who was a Christopher. Now, I guess the other number is an estimate. Well, it's possible that it's not an estimate, but just even zeros or something kind of. She, after a brief conversation about to resign, PTA mother took the letter out of her purse and tore it up. "It never occurred to me that one person like myself mattered. I see it now," she exclaimed. "If you join an organization or a club, make it one where you can do a little missionary work. Some of you can be more than mere members. You can get on committees, take official posts, and assume leadership in a variety of ways. Not for personal advantage or privilege, of course, but with the distinct purpose of serving the general good." But isn't that perhaps the highest advantage to yourself, to be a Lucifer, a light bringer? All good and truth, basically. That you're trying to illuminate some of that. One housewife who brought the spirituality of her home out in the marketplace with a simple, forceful reminder to tens of millions is Mrs. Herbert W. Hines, Mother of the Year for 1948, recently invited to be one of the 18 participants in the Life Roundtable held at Rye, New York. to discuss the third right enunciated in the Declaration of Independence, the pursuit of happiness. Yeah, how is that a right? Because what people pursue to make themselves happy can vary quite a bit, right? Miss Hines stated clearly and convincingly, I think happiness is primarily a spiritual matter. Religious faith has more to do with bringing happiness to an individual than anything else. This was in direct contrast to the statement made by Dr. Sidney Hook, chairman of the Department of Philosophy of New York University. Dr. Hook, according to the news report on the gathering, championed the growing secularist point of view by taking the stand that moral rules for the guidance of life can be upheld without reference to religion. Well, that's not exactly the opposite. This materialistic conception by the educator might have had a widespread detrimental effect had not an average housewife and mother made her voice heard on behalf of an elementary truth, understood by practically all, but the tiny minority who were determined to eliminate all trace of God from American life. Participate personally in all local, state, and national elections, not only by voting but by getting others to vote as well, assisting them to reach a proper understanding of the issues at stake. Try to get full and authoritative information on candidates and all measures to be voted upon sufficiently in advance so as to be able to take steps to see that this information is passed on to as many as possible. And of course, one of the problems that we have today is that a lot of these things are, there's so much thrown in. Oh, it's an infrastructure bill. What's that 98% other stuff? Oh, don't concern yourself with that one. Check into the teaching in all schools, elementary and high schools, colleges and universities for which you are paying taxes. See that all teachers and instructors are upholding the Constitution as they have sworn an oath of allegiance to do. Whenever you find any defects, go yourself and take others with you to the school in question and request fulfillment of its obligation. It is usually more effective to go directly to the institution involved than to a board of education. Remember, this is your right, whether or not you have children in the school. As a taxpayer, the school is your concern as much as it is anyone's, and you, therefore, have a responsibility to it. Write letters. This powerful means is at the disposal of every parent. You will find suggestions about this in Chapter 12, Letter Writing, A Service to Society. A habit easily formed, it is an excellent means of keeping alive a sense of participation in and responsibility to the big world that lies beyond the home. One young mother who does her bit by writing letters of approval or disapproval as part of her apostolate told us, I can't tell you how much I appreciate being a Christopher, even a silent one. Being the mother of two and expecting another, I'm tied to my home, but I'm still raring to do something concrete. I've had some interesting experience in letter writing, yet I never dreamed so much good could be accomplished with so little effort. I'm beginning to see more clearly than ever that all the household tasks in the world will matter little if we bury whatever other talents we have. 6. Persuade others to be Christophers. You will frequently find an opportunity to encourage at least one other person to be a doer rather than a talker. It may be done by a word to your neighbor, your grocer, your hairdresser. It may be a note to your cousin in Wyoming who hasn't decided what kind of job to take after graduating from college. Or you may start things moving in the right direction, or simply by a conversation over the phone. One woman told how she made a passing remark about a year ago in just that way. When a friend began bemoaning the confusion of the times, she countered with, well, I guess people like you and me can take our share of the blame. We want good government, good schools, and good everything else. But we don't lift a finger to do anything about it. I can't think of one of our friends who is encouraging her kids to take any kind of a job except where they can feather their own nest. To this woman's amazement, 6 months later, she learned that, as a result of that brief comment over the phone, her friend's son had taken a post on a board of education in Oregon and refused a tempting business offer which promised more money and a greater degree of financial security for the future. 7. Be selective and get others to be likewise. The fields of education, government, labor management, communications, and other allied spheres that influence the thoughts and actions of millions in the correct order of things should be your servants, not your masters. It is up to you to see that this order is not reversed. The best way to accomplish this is to see that these fields are staffed from top to bottom by normal, sensible Americans, rather than by those whose perverted reasoning is an ever-increasing threat to our democracy. There is another means to achieve this purpose, however, and it is one that is not used often enough. It is your right to be selective, i.e., to accept what is good and reject what is evil. Most appreciate that they have a right of acceptance, but too often overlook their right of rejection. This distinction is most important. The apostles of atheism, subversion, perversion, viciousness, and rottenness of all types are forever abusing their God-given freedom to destroy freedom. Don't allow them to confuse you. Freedom must always be distinguished from license. Well, it's sort of the same thing. Well, excusing things is not the same thing as freedom, but so, yeah. One may be free to sell good oysters, but he has no right to sell bad ones. From your home, you have innumerable ways of exercising your right of acceptance and rejection. Do not worry about your sense of judgment. The average American mother and father are well blessed with common sense, fairness, and safe norms of decency. As citizens and as taxpayers, you can make your voices heard by insisting on truth and integrity in education. And government, and by taking steps to eliminate all that is opposed to them. With regard to the objectionable in newspapers, magazines, books, movies, radio, and television, you can move mountains if you will, but pass the word along, and enlist in every way you can the cooperation of other parents. Censorship can be a dangerous means, but there's a little chance of anything but good coming from the individual personal judgment of people like you. By giving your patronage generously to what is good and withholding it from what you judge to be evil, you will be amazed at the vital power in your hands, the good you can do by merely not going to a movie that you think is below par, by turning off a radio program that borders on the vulgar or subversive, by not buying a magazine which makes a policy of introducing stories or pictures that are out of place in your home, will be a revelation to you. If enough of your kind of people do that consistently and phone around the neighborhood to get other parents who think similarly to do the same, you'll be starting a ground swell that cannot fail to have telling effects. In one of his recent columns, George E. Sokolsky touched on this point very penetratingly. Each individual enjoys the privilege of rejecting what he believes to be untrue, harmful, or malicious, he wrote. He is lawfully entitled to express that rejection and to state the reason for his choice, either verbally or in writing, or by such an act as withholding from purchasing a commodity or making a contribution. For instance, I never purchase a ticket for a motion picture written or produced by a communist or fellow traveler, or in which such a person performs, no matter how small a part. That is my choice, and I am fully within my right. I make no contribution to a philanthropic institution or to a public cause with which even one communist is connected, or the record of which indicates an acceptance of or an alliance with communists. That is my right and privilege, and no one can prevent me from pursuing my choice. Yes, there are hundreds of ways in which you can start as a committee of one in being a Christopher in the sanctuary of your own home. You and a million others like you can develop together a force that nothing will be able to stop, that will sweep over the country and to the farthest parts of the earth, you will have some inkling of the important role you are playing as a real partner of Christ in saving the world. The knowledge that will buoy you up in the midst of difficulties that must be the lot of anyone who associates himself or her in such an intimate relationship with the crucified one. That's actually one of the weakest and most contradictory parts of the Jesus story, but his lot was suffering from the crib to the cross because he loved even the least of men so much. But you will never know until you stand before the judgment seat of God what your cooperation meant, how much you counted in bringing innumerable others to the heaven of happiness that Christ prepared for each and every human being. Then, in that perspective of eternity, you will see what a joy and a privilege it was to take things a bit hard on earth in an attempt to make them a bit easier for those who have not been blessed as have you. Now, symbolically, okay, they call him Lucifer in 3 verses in the Bible. I've done my Christ is Lucifer program to explain that further in context of the Catholic Church. So that's the Venus principle, the living word, and the cross being the sun. So the combining of those principles is the truth we're trying to get at, right? Think big and act big. But you will have to think and act in a big way, in terms of the world, not only of the neighborhood, of all men, not just a few. You will have to be daring and take literally the words of the Master when he said, "Launch out into the deep. In a cautious and shallow water, the returns are always small. Only far out into the deep, where the waves are rough and the chances are great, is there much to be gained. Rather than devote your time and energies to theorizing while the enemies of Christ are doing," well, theorizing is working with the fact claims. Rather than talk only to your own small circle while the godless talk to 100 million others. Rather than expend your lives in wishful thinking, in passing resolutions, or in complaining about conditions. With faith, with will, and with courage, you can light your lantern and boldly carry it into the darkness of error and confusion and hate. Oh, that last verse certainly shows we're a Christopher and a Luciferian. It can be the same thing. You, women, are far too important to preoccupy yourselves only with little things, too powerful a force for good to fiddle while Rome burns. With God's help, you can bring the Christ-like qualities of the happy Christian home, back into a blind, unhappy world. Like Our Lady, the first Christ-bearer, literally and figuratively, you can help renew the face of the earth. For all of you, there is a breathtaking opportunity, a tremendous challenge. There is no time to lose, already too long on the march. The forces of evil have ravaged half the globe. With quick daring, however, and by acting at once, you can stop that march. You can be God's means, God's handmaidens in restoring to a weary, heart-sick world the peace for which Christ suffered and died. And, well, if an example is set and it's supposed to do good, you can definitely bounce off that. But no matter how things have fallen per se, at least in the personal sphere, you can start to, lift things back up. And who knows how many that will spread to. Light, I illuminate.